Well, hey, friends, welcome back to the podcast. This is Rhonda. We're going to talk about imposter syndrome today. I did a podcast or talked about this a hot bit ago, but I've had several practitioners come up to me, and usually it's a kind of a sidebar conversation. Nobody really wants to talk about it like inside the Facebook group or inside Clinical Business Academy. Even in Clinical Academy, like in all of the different places that I work with practitioners, it's like the conversation that no one really wants to talk about because kind of like the big secret, right? But it's that internal dialogue that gets us in trouble so often with ourselves, and then it prevents us from being the best at what we do clinically. So I think, everybody struggled with it. I do too. But, that feeling of like you're not good enough, or you don't deserve the success, or you don't know enough, or what if people find out I really don't know what I'm doing? You're not alone. So many practitioners feel the same way. I think everybody does at some point or another as your clinical confidence grows and your skills as a business owner and that kind of thing. That can even creep in where you're thinking, why do I even have a business? What do I know about business? What do I even know how to do in this? I'm just a big imposter. I look like I'm all successful, but I'm not making any money and I'm, not paying myself and I'm, barely making a living, but I look like I'm all like that stuff starts to kind of mess with your mind a little bit, right? So I just want to talk about it today because it has come up in the last few weeks, like sidebar, as I mentioned. So someone will, ask me like, I just don't feel like I know enough. And I get that a lot. I'm going to tell you where I hear that the most. It has to do with clinicians who have all the head knowledge. In other words, they've completed like a certification course, or they finally have a diploma of something. I'm a nutritionist, or I've graduated from this program or that program. And they'll say, I know all the things, I know all the information, but now I don't know how to implement it or integrate it in my practice, like with actual patients. That's where I think it comes up the most, I would say, clinically. So that's why I wanted to bring it up again. So we know what imposter syndrome is. It's just that feeling of not being enough. I'm faking it on the outside, but I'm really not feeling the confidence on the inside. And one of the ways that you'll know that that might be like kind of running in the background a little bit, where your brain is trying to keep you safe by hijacking those thoughts. And that is, you start feeling like, well, what if I get exposed as a fraud? Or what if my skills and abilities don't get the good results that I'm really wanting, and someone's going to think that I'm a fraud? Or I have a license as a chiropractor or an acupuncturist, but I don't have a certification in quote functional medicine. And so then that makes me a fraud, but it actually doesn't. I think a key kind of thing we want to think about here is that imposter syndrome isn't so much about your lack of skill or ability. It's really more about your perception of yourself. I think that's a huge factor right there. It has more to do with our own self-perception, not the imposter syndrome as in the lack of skills. It's just what we believe about ourselves. And it is common because we think that we have to be perfect all the time, right? I have to have the perfect protocol, or I have to make sure that my follow-ups are all good, or I have to make sure that the business looks good and everything looks good. We feel like we have to be perfect all the time or get exactly right the first time. And if you were going to talk to another practitioner who was struggling with this, what advice would you give them? Would you tell them, yes, you definitely have to be perfect every time? No, of course not. You would say, hey, give yourself a break. Like, be kind to yourself. It doesn't have to be perfect all the time. You just fix it, kind of work on it as you go. Another sign is that you may be feeling a little bit unsure about yourself, is feeling like you are responsible for every aspect of the journey of the patient. In other words, you want to monitor and manage and make sure, because that gives you the sense of security or safety. And it doesn't allow the patient the opportunity to fail, right? They don't do what they're supposed to do. But then sometimes we take that on, right? I'm like, oh, maybe I didn't communicate well, or maybe I wasn't good enough over here, or I didn't, meet them where they were at. Again, I can't do this. That's the self-talk. I'm not good enough, etc. You might also find sometimes practitioners will tell me they'll look at someone else and they'll go, well, oh, look at that practitioner over there. There's somebody in my town that does X, Y, and Z, and they have a really busy practice, and I'm over here on the struggle bus. And then you feel like an imposter compared to somebody else, but there's no comparison. Stay in your lane. You do what you do best. And yes, you might need a little business help. You might need a little additional clinical training, or you might need a mentor or coach, or you might need to get in a group of people, someone where you can really feel supported together. That doesn't mean that you're an imposter, right? And the other thing I think that we do more to that imposter syndrome kind of feeling is that because we're on a very non-traditional path, meaning it's almost like it's less legit because it's not conventional medicine, at least in the eyes of the patient. They look at you with the hairy eyebrow like, and why do you think you should be doing this? What is this all about? When it's what we know, it's what we're good at, it's what we can do. We all know it's legitimate. We know that we can actually make a difference in the patient's life. But then when you're met with that skepticism, it's like a slippery slope, right? That little door gets open of self-doubt. And again, back to your perception of yourself, that little bit of self-doubt starts to creep in. And then we go, oh, see, I'm never going to get it right. I'm just a big old fat failure. I'm a big imposter. So now, how are we going to turn this around? Because whether you're in it now, there will come a point where that may show up. And it might even show up in parenting or, in other of your life. But I want to talk through this with you. I'm going to give you some strategies that when that feeling starts to creep in, now you have a few tools that you can use to kind of nip it in the bud and say, nope, we're not going there. Number one, recognize it and acknowledge it. That's the first step. You have to go, oh, look at that. There's that, feeling of inadequacy that's showing up, i.e. imposter syndrome, whatever you want to name it. But there it is. I see that. I'm talking to the patient, or the patient left, or we finished a Zoom call on a virtual meeting, and I'm feeling like I am the biggest fake in the world. The fact that you can recognize it and you can acknowledge that that's what you're feeling is huge, because when you can acknowledge it, then you can quickly turn that around and just remind yourself this is completely normal. And here's what I always say about that. As long as you know a little bit more than the person that you're leading, that makes you the smartest guy in the room or girl. You get it? Like the patient knows X, but you know X plus Y. You know X and you've already graduated to Y. Maybe you're at Z already. As long as you know more than they do, you're the smartest person in the room. Own it, friend. Own it. There's no imposter syndrome that can live there, because you then are the smartest guy in the room. So that means it can't be there. Doesn't mean that you don't have more to learn, or you maybe need to sharpen your skills in one place or another, but there's lots of resources. Clinical Academy. I've got a Clinical Academy. It's where you can learn all of the clinical things in practical, real time, as in how to put it boots on the ground and integrate it in your practice, resources and trainings and all that stuff, if that's what you need help with. If you just need community, get on a Facebook group. Go to the Facebook group. I'll link them in the show notes, but it's Clinical Mastery with Ronda Nelson. Go get in the Facebook group. Ask your questions. Get community. Start getting connected. When that starts to come up, acknowledge it. Say, I'm the smartest person in the room, and I think I need to feel a little bit of support. Then go find your community where you can feel support. So once you recognize it, once you acknowledge it, then you just have to start kind of reframing the way that you think about it. So we're likely going to default to, I'm not good enough, or, I don't know enough, or who am I to do this? Instead, just a simple reframe is, I am so thankful that I'm always learning. Has a completely different energy around it. I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to continue to learn and grow. That's the opportunity. That's the reframe. And then keep a win journal. I had someone tell me this a long time ago, and this is what they recommended. And I have a notes in my phone, a notes app. This is where I put them. At the end of the day, every day, and I've been doing this for, I don't know, maybe a year now, probably a couple years now. My note's really long. Every day, I try. I don't get it every day. I probably get 4 days a week of the 5 work days. But I write down a win for the day. I don't write down a challenge. I don't write what I feel like I failed at. I write down my win for the day. And my win for the day might be, on some days, that I actually ate lunch. Because sometimes I just get so busy that I'll skip right through it. Not good. But that might have been my win for the day, because everything else about the day was crazy. But that might have been my win. Or my win was with a patient. Or my win was that I upheld one of my own personal boundaries with a patient. And I said, nope, this is not how we do it here. If you come here, you're going to get your supplements through our office so that I can help maintain and manage what you're doing and ensure that you get the results that I'm promising or that I'm trying to achieve for you. Like standing up for those kinds of things, like that's a win. So I would say write down your wins. Keep a win journal or keep in like your notes in your phone. It's easy for me because I can just type it in there really quick. So keep that journal and write it down so that when you start feeling those feelings of like, I'm not good enough, you just say, I'm going to go back and read all of this because those are your credits, right? That's like your CV. Those are your credits. Those are your film credits. This is what you're really good at. And you get to read through them. And all of a sudden, those feelings of like you're inadequate, they're just gone. And then don't be afraid to be okay with being imperfect. We think we just really always have to be perfect all the time. You don't have to be perfect. Being imperfect is part of the human experience because there's no way you can know all of it. And then be vulnerable when you make a mistake, be honest about it. You say, I think that supplement was probably not the best supplement for you. It was fine, but let's change it up this next time and see if we can get a little bit better response. I'm not happy with the way that this supplement is what it's given us. So I'm going to change it and we're going to do something different. That doesn't mean you failed. It just means that you went out and asked a question in the Facebook group like, hey, what would you all do for XYZ? And the collective hive comes back and says, oh my gosh, you should do la, la, la. And now all of a sudden you have a whole bunch more ideas about things that you can do with that patient. And then kind of along the same lines, I guess, but just celebrate your wins. Don't be afraid to say, look where I've come from. Like think back to when you very first started, when you very first opened your practice, virtual, hybrid, brick and mortar. Think about then when you first got into it and you didn't know anything. And it all just felt like a huge sea of information. You were never going to be able to grasp all of it. And now look at where you are now. Some of you might be way far along. You've been doing it for 20 plus years, or you might be just a year or two in. But look back to when you started and look at where you are now and like pat yourself on the back, friend, because you're doing it. You're doing a good job. You're just on that continual journey of growing and learning and knowing more and more and more. So now, what can you do when you get stuck? First of all, start by saying, I am. You need to give your brain something else to think about other than what you're not doing right, right? That's that law of attraction. So instead of saying, I'm such an imposter, or I'll never get it right, or I don't know what I'm doing, how about you just say, I am knowledgeable, I am smart, I know how to do this, and I'm good at it. I know how to get anxiety resolved. Focus on the thing that you know how to do well. I know how to fix digestion, or I know how to improve people's sleep. Get the I know. Those strong, positive, affirming statements. And then maybe think about 3 things. This always helps me. When I get to feeling like that, when I'm just kind of feeling a little bit low. I think my low lately has been that the brick and mortar business in Seattle has just been in so much turmoil. I've basically had to recreate the whole business from the ground. I just kind of like take all the walls down, leave a half a wall standing and start over. And it's just been a lot of work. And there's been many, many moments, like many, many, many moments where at the end of the day, I think, why am I even doing this? I don't know how to run a business. I don't know how to do this. I'm not good at it. Can't do marketing. I can't do staff. I can't hire well. I can't get these systems right. But it's all I in the negative. And then it's even worse because I have Clinical Business Academy where I'm teaching you practitioners how to build a super successful wellness practice. So then I feel like even more of a fraud. And that's when I can kind of start to go down the hole. I go down in the pit. And sometimes I go there and sometimes I wallow in it a little bit, but other times I just have to stop and say, no, it doesn't mean that I don't know what I'm doing. It just means that it's harder right now. But I do know how to do this. And I have to remind myself. I had a 7-figure practice when I had my brick and mortar wellness practice. And I was a solo practitioner with 2 staff people. And I had a 7-figure practice. And it was just me generating the revenue. Wellness, supplements, and a few other, testing and that kind of thing. That was it. I know how to do this. So I have to remind myself of my success or remind myself of my past experience. And that allows me to have a different energy around what it is that I'm doing so that I can say, I can do this. I do know how to talk to people. I do know how to sell, meaning communicate something in a way that's going to help the other person see that I've got the life ring and they're drowning. I'm the one that can help you over here. Here's how I'm going to be able to help you. And at the end of the day, it's really just selling, but not in a slimy way. But I'm good at that, meaning I know how to communicate with people and help them see the value for themselves in a solution. But I have to remind myself of that because in the last 6 months, this has been hard. This has been a super, super hard period of time. So I get it. Like, I get it. But you got to remind yourself it doesn't have to be perfect all the time. Sometimes it's just bumpy, sometimes it's just turbulent. But you'll get through it. You will get through it, and I'm going to get through it too, and I am getting through it because I just keep one step after the next because it's so easy to just think, give up, forget it, I can't do this. So now, what are we gonna do long term? We got mindset shifting. You've got your I am statements. Write it down in a notes or, a journal or something like that, and then acknowledge that you don't know everything. Celebrate your progress, write down your wins. We've got all that. So now how are you gonna maintain it? Well, first, community, I think, is everything. You've got to stay in relationship. You cannot do this work, I don't think, in my opinion. I don't think you can do this work and be an island because there's so much value to be gained in the collaboration and the conversation that happens one practitioner to another. Because you might have a really challenging patient case. This is what happens inside Clinical Mastery Facebook group all the time. Is doctors are coming in saying, I've got this patient, here's what's happening, here's what I gave them, here's their test results, blah, blah, blah. And then the team, that the collective hive, the tribe that we've created, they'll weigh in and they weigh in and they say, oh, well, I did this, or it might be a this situation going on, or this might be a supplement that you may want to consider. Here's the thing. You may just incorporate all that information and you may not do any of it, but it might have caused you to think about the problem differently, allowing you then to come up with a solution that does work for you because we get so stuck in a box. And I think that's where this self-doubt imposter thing comes from is we get so isolated. And I would say for me, I feel pretty isolated up here, in the brick and mortar. I feel pretty isolated. And I'm in a competitive and I will call it a hostile niche. The business is not in the wellness space, it's a med spa. And I feel very, very alone a lot of the time. So I understand that feeling. So having a community, it would make my job and my process so much easier if I had a collective community that I could lean on and ask questions to. And then another thing is to just, have a goal. Where do you want to be? Where do you want to go? Because what happens is we get on the treadmill and we just start kind of treading water every day, same, 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 same. Well, where do you want to go? How much revenue do you want to make this year? How much revenue do you wanna make next year? How much revenue do you wanna make in the next 30 days? If you need $10,000 in the next 30 days in your pocket, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna do that? You gotta have a plan. And if you don't know the plan, then reach out and ask for help. Again, there's the value of community, right? And so I really want you to lean into that you don't have to have it all right. You're never gonna have it all right. But there are people and communities out there that can provide the kind of support that you really need or want in order to feel confident about what you're doing and not have to battle I'll call him an internal demon, but it's that internal dialogue, we'll call it, that just always wants to point out what you're not doing right. But listen, you're here, you're listening to this podcast. That's a win for you, friend, because you're listening because you want to learn, you want to know, and you don't want to feel like this anymore. So you've got the tools to be able to do it, whether you shift your mindset, whether you write down your wins, you celebrate your wins, get in community, whatever it is that's going to work best for you. You're here because you're an amazing practitioner and because you want to have a successful business. You want to serve your patients well and you want to see them get the results that they deserve. And you know how to do it. You got the life ring and they're drowning. You're going to always share it. You're always going to say, I got you. And when they say yes, and then you get those results, that doesn't sound much like an imposter to me. I think you got this, friend. You got this. We do not have to feel like that. I'm speaking this to myself as much as I am to you. So we really are all in this together. So that's what I've got for you today, this week on the podcast. Have an amazing week. If you need help with clinical, you know where to find it. It's in the show notes, rondanelson.com/clinical academy. And if you need help with your business, it would be my greatest honor to be able to coach you and help you and lead you through the steps, give you the knowledge and the training and the tools, most importantly, to help you be successful as a business owner. And the more that you can do these types of things, the less that imposter syndrome wants to talk back to you because you'll have a community in either place. So, rondanelson.com/clinical academy or rondanelson.com/CBA. And if you want to just dip your toe in the water and see a little bit about what my life is like with the practitioners that I have in my community, just find us on Facebook at Clinical Mastery with Ronda Nelson. All right, friends, take care. I'll see you next week on the podcast.